people out here.
And first, let me introduce those at the head table who you probably won't be hearing from later. I can't guarantee that, but let's try. First of all, the lady behind the man, the lady that's really in front of the man a lot of times, our honored wife, Helen George. Helen, stand please. Next, their son, Bradley. Please stand, Bradley. Their son-in-law, George Bralla. George. Betty Iverson, wife of Fred. Thank you, Betty. And the wife of Central Credit Union Chairman Dick Haney, Diane Haney. Diane. Now on your right, far right, first of all, the wife of Financial Federal Chairman Joe Hitt, Stephanie Hitt. Stephanie. Richard Brodell. Richard or Dick, do you prefer? Dick, thank you. Dick Brodell. Next, Deanna Brocksterman. Deanna. And lastly, my CEO, Jody Bruno. We're here for a celebration. We're celebrating almost a half century of service to credit unions by one of our own. Al George has just completed 40 years as a volunteer official. He's not retiring, he's just getting warmed up. Al is unique in many ways, as you will hear and see tonight. One of his rare characteristics is that he's made all of his contributions to credit unions solely as a volunteer. One of our basic CUNA philosophies states the broad, active involvement of unpaid volunteers is the backbone of the credit union movement. You might say Al was a purist in this regard. No pay, but many personal satisfactions and memories. I want you to hear now from those who are closest to him. We all feel fondly of J. Alvin, and I wish there was time to introduce everyone in the room. But instead, let's let the following persons speak for all of us. First, a lady who has been very close to him for most of this time, his daughter, Janine George Bralla. Janine?
Guys, I just want to say, he's not Al to me, he's Dad, so just remember that. You know, I guess John came over a month or so ago and asked me to speak, and I assume I'm the first one, only because I've known him the longest. But, you know, I really don't think that's the case, because, you know, parents tend to change a lot as you grow older. So I don't think I know him quite the way you all know him. But one of the things that John also told me about, which I was very surprised, I didn't realize it had been actually 40 years. Of course, I only admit to 29, but anyway. I didn't realize when John came over that I'm actually the one that drove him to credit unions. Obvious that counting money was more exciting than changing diapers, and so he's been involved with credit unions ever since. Now, I suppose that's better than driving him to drink and driving him to the poorhouse, although I will admit that I've tried to do that pretty well for the last few years. But I will say that I only wish that if I had a career that lasted 40 years, maybe if I'm lucky I will, that I find one that I enjoy as much as my father has enjoyed credit unions. Not only has he found a lot of fulfillment, a lot of joy out of the credit unions, but he's found a lot of friends. And I think it's wonderful that you all are honoring him tonight and showing the respect that you have for him and the work that he's done over the last 40 years. And all I have to say, lastly, to John is I hope 40 years from now, when my dad is 105, 80 years with credit unions, that you're all back here again, honoring him again in 80 years.
A friend of mine and the vice chairman of NARCUP, you're all familiar with NARCUP, I think, and the gentleman who was the chairman of Al's campaign when he ran for the national chairmanship of CUNA, Mr. Fred Iverson. Fred?
Thank you, John. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's certainly a pleasure to come out here and say something about Al. Since John only gave me a couple minutes, it'll all have to be good stuff. But Al's highlight in the credit union movement, of course, I think, goes way, way back, and as I recall, back in 1962, up in the northern part of the state, he was nominated for chairman or president of the California Credit Union League. And I still remember the gentleman that made the nomination speech. I didn't know Al too well then because I was from the San Fernando Valley chapter. Al was from down here in San Diego. But I still remember part of that nomination speech. The gentleman said he was going to nominate a man that stood tall in the saddle and could look over the mountain. And Al, I think you stood tall in the saddle and you looked over all the mountains. And we're really proud of you. Another thing, I believe that someplace in the good book, there's something that says man is not a prophet in his own country or something like that. And I felt that for a long time. I don't think Al has received the proper respect and, well, respect, yeah, but all the things he should have had down here because he was just one of you. But on the state and national level, we know better. We know that Al stood tall in the saddle. And we was proud of Al up and down the state and on the national level. I would like to speak just a little, it was mentioned earlier here, about Al's campaign when he ran for Credit Union National Association Chairman of the Board. And I think I put in a good week's work up there, and a little extra too, so a lot of other people did. I happen to be lucky enough to be one of Al's people that worked on his campaign. And Al was the chairman of CUNA, I think, in 78 and 79. And he ran against an incumbent by the name of Dave Wright. And I'll never forget, we worked hard, we worked long. And one of the people that made a nomination speech for Al gets up on the floor, not the first one, we had him pretty well lined up, but one of the other fellows that thought he should get in the act. Now remember, his opponent's name was Wright. And this fellow gets up there and he starts in. He says, "We have the right man in the right place and at the right time." Most of us almost fell out of our chairs that time. In spite of Al having me work on his campaign, I'm happy to say that he was elected. Now, Al remembers those days, and I think it'll go down there in his memories for a long time. And Al's campaign slogan that he came up with, I know you've probably heard it kicked around here tonight, and I think it had a lot to do with his election, was, "It's Al by George." And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that it's an honor for me to be here and talk about Al, and it is Al by George. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Next, someone we all know and respect. For the past 15 years, president of the California Credit Union League, I want you to welcome Bill Brosterman.
John, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Before dinner, there was two that knew what I was going to say. That was God and myself. And now that dinner is over, only God knows what I'm going to say. 3 minutes, two at the short side, 3 at the long side, has been assigned to us. And Al, I know you'll know that I know a lot of things that you just soon I wouldn't say. And quite frankly, they wouldn't fit into 2 minutes. But the good things will fit in 2 minutes. I'll back off of that, you know I was facetious in saying that. Frankly, if I was to say all the good things I know about Al George, you folks would all leave before I got through with doing this, and I don't want to do that. I think Fred, talking about the campaign, we all know that Al's been a leader at the chapter level, first in his credit union, and I think that's the most important thing to say. Then at the chapter level, then at the state level, then at the national level, then at the international level. And I think it's important to stair-step all of those areas. But the ones that I remember the most, Fred has already alluded to, and that's the campaign that we were all involved in when Al ran for chairman of CUNA. And I won't reiterate what Fred has already said, but I want to just mention a couple items that I think might come home to each of you. As a volunteer, Al worked for the San Diego Gas and Electric Company. But I remember one night in Riverside, when a group of us met about 8 o'clock at night. He drove to Riverside after he did his day's work, and we sat there until midnight, planning his campaign, going through skull practice on what his speeches should be like, talking in terms of what he should say. Another time we've been in San Clemente doing the same thing. And he got his pay doubled every time he did that as a volunteer. And all of you who are in volunteers know what I'm saying. He really put his heart and soul into it, and Al George, on his own merit, was the one that came through as the winner. And the other thing I constantly think of is Al is the most frugal person I know, both personally and on behalf of the credit union movement. But truthfully, he would do this. He would catch the alley birds so that he could get cheaper fares everywhere he went on behalf of the Credit Union National Association. And now I remember that. I even rode one with you one time. Reluctantly, but I did. And maybe I should just wind this up by saying that in my own lifetime, I've had the pleasure of working with many of the leaders of our credit union movement. But among those leaders, when one person stands tall, then that is someone to be revered. And Al George, you stood tall among all those leaders. And my compliments to you, and I commend Al George to all of you here. Thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to everyone who came from beyond the limits of our beloved San Diego County. It's a sacrifice, and it means a lot to Al and to all of us. And now a lady who was recently on Bill's chairperson of the league, that is Dorothy Brodell. Dorothy, please.
Thank you, John. I'm a little bit confused tonight. I'm with you, Bill. In 2 minutes, what can you say about Al George? John, I always thought Bill was my president instead of me being his chairperson. That's okay. Janine, your father admitted to me over the weekend that he was 39 years old on March 1st. You admit to 29. Helen confessed they're looking to a 42nd anniversary. I really have trouble with all of these things, and I get confused easy that I'm from the north. One of the things I would like to do, first of all, is to commend San Diego for doing something like this. And for me to tell you what Al George has meant to me in 2 minutes would be ludicrous, but I will try. He has been an inspiration to me. He has been so supportive of all of our people that come up through the volunteers. And they're all volunteers, ladies and gentlemen. When they sit on the Assembly of Delegates, they are all volunteers. They are giving their weekends. And Al helps us to know that it's all worthwhile. It is his support and his inspiration and people like him and his vision that has made this league what it is. And there are hundreds of us like him coming up. And Al, we all want to be here for the 80 year.
Thank you, Dorothy. The next two presenters are chairman of the two local credit union boards which sponsored this event tonight, and on which Al serves for a cumulative of about 75 years. How do you like that? First, the chairman, please, of Central Credit Union, Rick Haney.
Good evening. Thank you, John. It's both an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you to help celebrate Al George's 40 years of credit union service. I know Al as a neighbor, as a tennis partner with a real mean slice serve, especially running all the sport, as a friend and as a colleague on our credit union board of directors. As a friend and a neighbor, Diane and I could not ask for a better friend and neighbor. As a tennis partner, as a member of our board of directors and as treasurer of our credit union, Al is an invaluable asset. His experience both at the local, state, and national level is something that money can't buy, even if we could afford it. We consider ourselves indeed fortunate to have his vast experience and his wise counsel on our board of directors. Even during his tenure at CUNA, when his time was when he really wasn't available, he remained tremendously involved with the credit union and rarely missed meetings. Our credit union appreciates his tireless efforts on behalf of our credit union, as well as not only our credit union, but the entire credit union movement, as you're all aware. He has obviously been a very dedicated participant in that movement. Al frequently advises us and reminds us at our meetings that we're not a bank, we're not a thrift, and thank God we're not an S&L. He reminds us that we're unique and urges us not to forget, not to lose sight of credit union philosophy in our dealings with our members. I know we all admire and respect Al George. We admire his dedication to the credit union movement, and he gives us something to aspire to. Now, lest you conclude that he's a candidate for sainthood, after all those nice things that have been said about him, I must point out that his backhand needs a lot of work. That he's been known to imitate John McEnroe on the tennis court. He misses his share of line calls, and he tells the worst lawyer jokes of anybody.
Thank you, Rick. And next, please, Joe Hitt, the longtime volunteer official and currently chairman of Financial Federal Credit Union, Al's other credit union. Joe?
Last week, we both worked at the same company, and Al asked me what I'm going to be doing on Tuesday night. Well, it's certainly a great honor for me to be able to participate in this tribute to Al George. When I was thinking about the words I might use to describe my impressions of Al over the 9 or so years I've known him, I came up with 8, 20 seconds a pop.
You're my boss, go ahead.
The words are involvement, initiative, responsibility, enthusiasm, youth, volunteer, example, and leader. Al becomes directly involved in the world around him. Al takes initiative. If he sees something to be done, he'll do it. Al takes responsibility for his involvement in the initiative he takes. Al has enthusiasm. He performs his tasks in a positive, energetic way. Al has youth. Here's a man not much older than 59 years, I've heard some other numbers, who is possessed with youthful enthusiasm. As an example of the youthful enthusiasm, the enthusiastic life he leads, last fall, Al's lovely wife Helen invited Stephanie and I in a surprise get-together to celebrate their wedding anniversary. First we went to dinner, which was wonderful, though not unusual. But next was a trip to a masseuse for massage lessons. Al and Helen pursued their lessons with youthful enthusiasm. And of course, Al is a volunteer. The credit union movement's basic philosophy is people helping people. True people helping people cannot be accomplished without the volunteer attitude and the volunteers to go along with it. Volunteers are the essential uniqueness of the credit union movement. Al George typifies that volunteer attitude, and he's certainly the volunteer to go along with it. Al sets a high standard. He's an example for others to follow. The many ways that Al served the credit union movement will be listed in more detail later in the program, except for one thing, I think, which is the most important to our credit union right now. Al is chairman of our strategic planning committee, which means he is leading our credit union into the future. The credit union movement needs many more Al Georges in order to maintain its uniqueness, which sets it apart from the rest of the financial community. What this really means is that volunteers and the uniqueness they bring are needed in the credit union movement. The credit union movement must be unique to survive. Al George is responsible in many ways for the success and survival of the credit union movement over the last 40 years. Al, thank you from all of us.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'd like to ask those in the room who are serving credit unions in a volunteer capacity, just to raise your hand, please. Let's see how many here. Okay, good. We salute each of you. Thank you very much. Finally, a former star in radio before becoming Senior Vice President of the California Credit Union League, Laura Porter. Laura?
Actually, Janine, when the list first came out of presenters in order, I was first on that list. So you weren't intended to be there at all. But what happened was Bill Brocksterman saw that list, and he phoned John Bruni. He said, "You're going to watch these league people. You give them just a little bit, and they're going to get so uppity. Put her where she belongs." So, Janine, there we were. In a little while, you are going to hear from some other people about the incredible number of things that Al George has accomplished for the credit union community in the last 40 years. And when you hear all of that, I think that you will agree with me, he doesn't need a roast, he needs a rest. But I don't think that we're going to find Al taking a rest, not at all. Al has been part of the credit union community for so long that he can remember back in the days when doctors made home deliveries and pizzas didn't. There are some people in this room who don't even know what that means. Actually, Al, I was thinking about all of the things that you've done over the last 40 years, and it occurred to me, there is a name for the time when you have all of the skills and the know-how and the experience that you need to do your job. The name for that is retirement. But the wonderful thing about us in the credit union community is that when we have someone who has all of the skills, know-how, and experience that an Al George does, we don't let him retire. We just keep getting all the goodies that we can from him. Some of the people who have talked here tonight, Fred Iverson, Bill Brocksterman, have talked about the time that a lot of us had a hand in getting Al George elected the chairman of the Credit Union National Association. There are 18 people in this world who own a small golden bear lapel pin. And I am very proud to be one of very few staff people in this universe who has one of those things, because I was invited to be part of the development of that campaign, and it was an eye-opener. It was a real thrill for me. And one of the things that I remember that Al chose as part of his means of communicating his philosophy, his spirit, his commitment to the credit union community was this: a slogan that said, "One generation plants the trees so that the next may enjoy the shade." Al George has planted a seed of credit union growth and development and commitment that has blossomed and flowered into a credit union community that we are all enjoying the shade of. And I hope that every one of us, I'm confident that every one of us, in turn, is planting trees as well. I've been asked to make two presentations this evening, one on behalf of the official family of the California Credit Union System, and one on behalf of the management staff. And I would like to turn first to the official family presentation. And Al, this is a resolution that lists some of the accomplishments that you have fulfilled during the last 4 decades of credit union service. And I'm not going to take all the time to read it, but I do want to focus on one thing. Al George is the 1981 recipient of the Leo Shapiro Award. The Leo Shapiro Award is the highest honor that can be accorded to anyone in the credit union community in California. And you have in this room not just one, but a number of recipients of that award, and I hope you recognize what a truly special group of people that is. And it simply says, "Now therefore be it resolved that the Assembly of Delegates of the California Credit Union League commend J. Allen George for his dedicated unselfish service for the last 40 years," and it is signed by Don Arnold, Chairman of the Board of the California Credit Union League. And Al, the board wants you to have it. And then there's the presentation from us on staff. Some of you braved the elements to come to a little retirement get-together that we put on for Bill Brockstrom one night in January. And we wanted some way of recognizing Bill, of making it possible for all of you to know how to address him, because past president is awkward, and we wanted to give him a title of some kind. And Dick Johnson would have been here tonight, by the way, standing right here, right now, except that Dick Johnson is all wet. He is probably, even as we speak, getting ready to dive somewhere off the coast of the United States in the Atlantic Ocean, and that's why he's not here tonight. But Dick Johnson went to the Marine Commandant and said, will you give Bill Brockstrom a title? And they said, well, yeah, he'll have to go through boot camp, and we'll call in 1 or 2 other things before we give him a title. And Dick decided maybe Bill wasn't willing to do that. And he went to the Army, and he went to the Air Force, and he went to everybody you could think of in the military community, and nobody would give Bill Brockstrom a title. So we finally found one, and we made him a Kentucky colonel. So you may now call Bill Brockstrom Colonel Brockstrom. And I think that's just great, and I hope you're enjoying it. And we didn't want to do the same thing for Al George, because Al is a very special individual, and we didn't want him to have something that Bill Brockstrom had, quite frankly. We wanted him to be very different, very different. So I said, how about if we make Al George a member of an association to which I belong, that is devoted and dedicated, committed to camaraderie and friendship and good times. And so Dick Johnson said, well, okay, I guess you can do that. Janine, I want you to know that if the day ever comes when we manage to drive your dad to drink, he will do so in very good company, because he has now been initiated into the Tennessee Squire Association, sponsored by the Jack Daniel Distillery. He is now a landowner of property in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and now every year we're going to get together and talk about the coon hunt over our property.
appreciate so much having you as heading up the helm of our league, our California League. I want to thank all the presenters for moving quickly, and they did that as a courtesy to all of you. It's difficult to do on this kind of subject. Not everyone who wanted to be here tonight could be, and therefore we have collected and created a bound volume for Al of numerous personal letters, telegrams, and so forth. Copies of some of these communications are posted on the blue board to the right, and on the lovely table of memorabilia, which I hope you'll take time to look at as you leave. Helen George has provided these interesting items, and it would be your benefit to look at them if you can. I'll mention, however, the names of a few people that have written letters. I'm not going to read the letters. A very kind and personal letter, Al, from your son Chris in Bellingham, Washington. A thoughtful letter from Jim Jameson. One from Roger Jepson, the chairman of NCUA. Jay and Gail Shepard of Financial Federal Credit Union's board. Ernie Snook, a former director of Financial Federal. Also a man very close to your heart, Al, known as the father of California Credit Unions, Lee Shapiro. He remembers you, and it's posted on the board, and the original copy of that will be given to you later. One from Ralph Swoboda, who is the president of CUNA, and what have I got here? Ralph also sent a lovely desk plate inscribed, J. Alvin George, thanks for 40 years of service to the credit union movement. CUNA and the affiliates. Congressman Hunter has a letter for you, and Bill Lowry, Congressman Lowry, has... Debbie, with your purse is in here, it's so heavy I can't move it. Lovely plaque from Bill Lowry. I'm not going to read it because a copy is posted on the board, but I'm going to pick out just the last sentence. Let's see. Oh, second from the last paragraph. Therefore, I, Bill Lowry, member of Congress for the 41st District of California, do hereby commend J. Alvin George on his recognition and accomplishments and proclaim Tuesday, the 7th of March, 1989, as J. Alvin George Day in my congressional district. Al, enjoy your day and your evening and this event, which is strictly for you. Paul Olin is our co-chairman and will now present an award from Al's 2 credit unions and summarize the 40 years of accomplishments. Paul?
Thank you, John. I read a quote today, and it goes something like this. I think when people find things they love, when they find their niche, the drive is automatic. Do what you love. And I think that quote exemplifies Al George. When the steering committee asked me to present a summary of Al's achievements, I figured that would be appropriate, and so I agreed to do so. No questions asked. At the end of our meeting, I was reminded that each presenter was only allowed 2 to 3 minutes. Because they didn't want the agenda to be too long, lest people should fall asleep and begin to snore. And then they presented me the list of Al's achievements. And I asked you 2 to 3 minutes? Let's get real. Then I thought, how often do we have an opportunity to honor 40 years commitment to a movement in a single individual? Many of you know Al's background more thoroughly than I do. But for those who do not, here's just a brief bio. Al is a native of Iowa and served in the Marine Corps during World War II. Now, anyone that's in this room that's 44 years or younger is not going to remember that because you weren't born yet. But for the other 6 that are left, It was after the war in 1946 that Al joined San Diego Gas and Electric as a dedicated employee. And he must have liked them, and they must like him because he's still there. In 1948, Al began his long service to our movement by actively serving with San Diego Gas and Electric Credit Union as director. He must have liked that, too, because he's still a director. During his tenure, San Diego Gas and Electric Credit Union adopted a name change, Financial Federal. And Al served as treasurer, vice president, and president of that board. Not willing to shy away from a need when the call came for volunteers to help direct the San Diego chapter, Al served as program chairman, public relations, and scholarship chairman on the publicity committee and as chapter board of governor. And then Al really went crazy. For over 3 decades, Al has represented San Diego chapter as California Credit Union lead director. He served his term as chairman and on numerous committees, including executive, budget, and bylaws and rules procedures. His work with the chapter's committee resulted in the development of the chapter's president's manual and uniform bylaws. And all the time Al was running about volunteering, I suspect his wife Helen most probably was meeting him at the airport just so she could remember what her husband looked like between all those commitments. For 24 years, Al has served as CUNA National Director. In that capacity, Al's contributions have been focused in CUNA's committees: Executive, Governmental Affairs, Legal Studies and Personnel Policies. He served as Director of ICU Services, CSG, and was Chairman of the 1974 District 4 Conference. As CUNA Director, he was elected Corporate Secretary in 1976, was Chairman-elect in 1979, and then elected Chairman for 2 years for CUNA. When legislative battles were fought during deregulation, and what seemed like a chasm was just a small gorge, we all stood back and quite unabashedly cried out in unison, "There was George." When taxation was imminent, which none could afford, we slept a lot sounder. We knew there was George. And my first recollection of meeting Al George was approximately 12 years ago when I was a loan officer at Central Credit Union. Every so often, this very busy man who was always in a hurry would stop by and just ask how things were going. No matter how busy, he always found the time. Subsequently, our paths have crisscrossed and merged in various avenues. Al has served 34 years as director of Central Credit Union and is currently our treasurer. From a unique vantage point of both director with Al and then as CEO, it has been my perception that most any credit union person would benefit directly from Al's talents and abilities. As an engineer by profession, Al is charged to lay out, construct, manage, or if you will, to guide the course of. And in these responsibilities, he measures the stresses and strains. And oh my, how well do we know in our movement those strains and stresses we face. So over the years, Al, you have been a builder in this movement, providing seasoned experience and guidance to those of us who will benefit from your wisdom. And in your 40 years, I am reminded of words written long ago by the eminent Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. He spoke of the sea creature, chambered nautilus, which busily enlarges its life's shell as each year passes. He wrote, "Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Let each new chamber, nobler than the last, set thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leading thy time-worn shell by life's unresting sea." I submit that you have helped build the temples and the mansions of this credit union movement, and if my perception is correct, you will continue to build those temples and mansions in the future. Al, to show our appreciation to you from the people in the credit union movement, and particularly Financial Federal Credit Union and Central Credit Union, we would like for you to accept a special 40-year volunteer service award. Now, this award was specially designed for you, Al. It arrived this morning from New York at 10 o'clock. It's not quite finished yet. The completed award will have a lighted base to illuminate your achievements, but we hope you like it. And now, for everyone's pleasure, we have a short video that's highlighting Al's career and his achievements. And if anyone wants to get up and move to a different spot so they have better visual, please do so now.
Thank you, Barbara, for a beautiful video, and she'll present that to Al later. And I thank all of you who worked on this fine program, and I won't take time to give your names here, but we thank you and deeply appreciate what you've done. And now, it's Al by George.
I guess if you think I want to stop that, you're... Chairperson Debbie, guests, and I think you're all friends, so I'm going to address you all as friends tonight. John, Paul, Barbara, Margaret, thank you for all the things I know you put together. And for one person over here, I know who's been digging up a lot of memorabilia, and things have been disappearing off the wall in my office at home, and I've been wondering where they've gone, but I figured, well, they needed dusting probably after X number of years, and probably came down for that. But now I realize where they went. And I want you to recognize one thing over here. There's a collection of banks, and I don't know why I have banks. I guess I should call them credit unions, but unfortunately they were banks back in those days. I emptied all of them before I brought them down. So I would expect that, they'd all go home full, of course. John, you and I talked about this some time ago, about the anticipation is almost as great as the realization. And tonight I want to refute that statement, because the realization tonight, even though I knew about, John came to me several months ago to credit union meetings, and I didn't have time to take the trips that I wish I could have taken maybe in some times. Fortunately, we had great grandparents, and they took care of taking them on trips on occasions. But I took a lot from them, so a lot of the thanks goes to those three and to my other son in Washington, because they gave up a lot, probably a lot more than I did, in making this possible for me to be here tonight. There's several people over here who I didn't hear introduced, and I just would not be right if I didn't. And Audrey and Bud Maurer, Bill, Doug Doerr, who Doug almost got me in trouble in Washington. You saw my pictures of when I was at the Reagan inauguration in 1980, and Doug almost got me in trouble because we were walking across the Capitol yard and our grounds, and there was a fence, and Doug decided it was too far to go around, and there were three of us, and Doug had a little walkie-talkie. This is when Doug was active in Washington. And Doug had a little walkie-talkie, and we decided we were going to take a shortcut right straight across the Capitol grounds. And as we walked across the Capitol grounds, Doug had a little walkie-talkie, and I was following, another person was following. He said, "Governor, how are things back there?" And we kept going across, and we walked right through the Capitol ground, almost stumbled over Billy Graham as he came down the Capitol steps from the inauguration. We were told later that if we'd ever been stopped and taken, we probably would still be in some of the Washington prison. And for those of you, Dorothy, great year. I worked with Dorothy, and we had a session on parliamentary procedure before she became chairman, and she became the expert on parliamentary procedure before the year was over. She can teach a course and do a great job on it. Bill, the reason I remember Bill so well, and I was involved when we, 15 years ago now, that we made a decision, the right decision at the right time with the right person, when we decided we would pick Bill Bloxman for the chairman, the president of the California Credit Union League. And fortunately, I knew Bill because many years ago when we were back in Madison at meetings, when they, in the 60s, when they were having the problems, you remember, around the colleges, and Madison was one of the colleges that had many, many problems, and they had actually had an area boarded up about a mile and a half from the college, about a block from the hotel where we were staying. And the only thing we could do, you couldn't go anywhere other than stay in the hotel. And so there were several of us who were Californians or from other parts of the states or other states, and we were down in the bar because we couldn't go anywhere else. And we were down there, and the only thing we could do was the piano player was singing, and I found out that time that Bill sings about the same level I do, right, Bill? And we became fast friends from that day, and we've been friends ever since. And I always hope it'll always be that way because he's one of my very favorite people. I guess the sad thing I have to say tonight is, from my viewpoint, is work as a volunteer, credit union movement in 40 years. I just look and I don't think it can ever be done again. And I guess that's the sad part of it. Because the change in the environment in the credit union movement, with the credit unions getting bigger and bigger and more detail being needed, more and more expertise. The presidents have to be experts now. The board are not the experts. And the time that is needed will not be available to the volunteer anymore. I was able to go to board meetings on weekends. I was able to go to evenings. I was able to go to meetings and come back in the same evening, drive to Los Angeles after 5 o'clock, go to a meeting in the Los Angeles area and come back the same night and do things of that nature. Can't do that anymore because it's too complex. And that's the reason I guess I'm kind of sad, because I don't think there will be many people who will be able to do what I've had the opportunity to do, only because I was lucky, I guess, to be born at the right time. And I guess those are some of the things I have to say tonight. I'm pretty lucky to have been a lot of places at the right time. I was lucky to be in the chapter level when another man, Damon Raymer, was elected the league director, and a year later Damon became an examiner. And because they didn't have anyone else to select as an alternate, they selected me as the alternate. And I became a league director, just like overnight. I had no expectations of doing that. And I guess one of the things I'm pleased about is that I just the other day went to my 38th year of league meetings, and I haven't missed one in 38 years. I'm lucky that I've had my health to do that. A couple other things I feel proud of is when I was chairman of CUNA, we had a youth group. We still have a youth group, one of the greatest groups in our credit union movement. And I'm proud because there were those in our movement at that time wanted to do away with the youth group. And I feel youth is the answer to our credit union movement. Always has been, always will be. I was there one time. And I rescued it, and I have a plaque hanging on my wall from the youth movement of the Credit Union National Association with several whereases that give me a great deal of pride. Every once in a while, when I become a little dejected, when I become a little discouraged, I walk over and I look at that plaque and read the whereases on that plaque, and I am, again, it's like putting ethylene gasoline in your automobile. It kind of rejuvenates you all over again, and I'm really proud of that. A couple of the other things I'm proud of is that I was the one who made the motion when I was on ICU to adopt the share draft program. And we put it into the operation in 1976, somewhere along in there. And we tried it with 6 credit unions in the country, and I think you see where it is today. It's one of the things that I think the credit union movement is pleased to have, and it's one of the things that I'd like all of you to continue using the word shared route, because we on the uniqueness committee say this is what makes the credit union movement. One of the things that makes it unique is we have shared routes. I guess the other one is I'm proud of is that I was involved at every level of the credit union movement, as been mentioned here earlier. At the national level, the international level. I was able to serve on the international level when you saw pictures of being at the Taj Mahal when I was sent to New Delhi, India as a representative of the Credit Union National Association, and then when I had to go other places as a director of the international movement. It's a great organization, people, and I know none of you will ever let it down. And again, I think I'm lucky to have been a part of all of those areas of the Credit Union National Association. John gave me a time limit also, so I'm going to try to stick to it, John. Pretty close then. And I want to say something. The Point Loma Group, in 1948, right? All of them over here. And there are several there who I won't mention names, but I was involved with almost 40 years ago. And they were one of the first groups I worked with in the San Diego chapter, and was very active in this particular area. Before I say my closing remarks, I'd like to say to each of you that before you leave tonight, I hope each of you come by and I can properly shake your hand and thank you for all the things each of you have done for me over the past year, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. All of you have done something. You've provided inspiration for me. You've been a friend of mine. You've done things that caused me to want to continue in this credit union movement, because there's nothing like it anywhere I've ever been. I guess I'm really proud of Bill Lowry's comment, because just a couple weeks ago I got a call from Doug, and Doug asked me to be on Bill Lowry's congressional committee, and I've worked with Bill for a number of years, and he's a great individual, as is Duncan Hunter and the people you get to work with, and all of you, I hope, will get involved in this national level at that area, because it's an area that we need the help of those people. So I'm going to wrap up tonight by thanking each and every one of you, and asking you again and take my hand and let me thank each of you, Don, and all of you who've come from long distances. I'm going to read something that I read when I was chairman of CUNA. Read it at one of my meetings, and it became a statement that was printed on the front of the Credit Union magazine. I guess it kind of tells somewhat my lifetime in the credit union movement. By Albert Schweitzer, when he said, "It's not enough to merely exist. It's not enough to say, I'm earning enough to live and to support my family. I do my work well. I'm a good father. I'm a good husband. I'm a good churchgoer. That's all very well. But you must do something more. Seek always to do some good somewhere. Every man has to seek in his own way to make his own self more noble and to realize his true worth. You must give some time to your fellow man, even if it is a little thing. Do something for those who have a need for man's help. Something for which you get no pay, but just the privilege of doing it. For remember, you don't live in a world all your own. Your brothers are here too." And I'll finish tonight by quoting another quote-unquote great American, Frank Sinatra, who recently said at his celebration, "If you want to be heard, stand up and shout. If you want to be loved, shut up and sit down." You've all heard me. Now I just want to be loved. Thank you.
as president and representative of the youth and credit union movement now, who you were a person I think that we would like to aspire to. And in the spirit of Western CUNA Management School, which I'm sure hasn't been mentioned tonight, but you've probably been involved in, and I hope everyone follows suit, I'd like to give you a warm fuzzy. Last but not least, we need to get done with our door prizes, and I'm going to ask Annie if she would like to come up and